late, so not to delay this too much. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the session on Connect 2020 Global Agenda. And it's great to see you here, especially, and it's coming to the end of the very long week. So I think everyone is rather tired, but hopefully we'll have a good discussion here as well. So we have a good number of panelists. I think I'll introduce as we go, and I'll ask pose questions. But from representing various stakeholders here. So just to kickstart, and again to kickstart this discussion, I'll ask Deputy Secretary General of ITU to present the Connect 2020 agenda and what it is. Please, Malcolm.
Thank you very much, Thomas, and thank you all for coming. I'm sure you found it a very long week, so appreciate you being in this session with us. Just want to introduce the Connect 2020 agenda to you. It was adopted at the ITU Plenipotentiary Conference a year ago, and it is based on this vision, which are you operating the slides? Okay, so I don't know if you can read it from back there, but I'll read it out. So the vision that was agreed is an information society empowered by the interconnected world where telecom ICT enables and accelerates socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable growth and development for everyone. That's the vision. And then there was 4 main goals: growth, inclusiveness, sustainability, and innovation and partnership. So the idea is to have some targets, measurable targets for each of these objectives. So this is probably too detailed for you to be able to read, but I'll just pick out some highlights from this. As I say, they're all targets under each goal, which we intend to measure progress on. And I'll just highlight some of them. Under the first one on growth, for example, we're looking to have a substantial reduction in cost, so 40% more affordable telecommunications. Then inclusiveness. This is not just bridging the gap between developed and developing countries, but also looking to increase the number of women online. It's estimated 200 million less women online compared to men. And also including persons with disabilities. You know, in ITU we do a lot of work on accessibility. Andrea Sachs is with us, takes the lead on that. So it's also to make sure persons with disabilities can benefit from ICTs. And then on sustainability, we're working on ways of reducing e-waste, for example. So the target there is a 50% reduction in e-waste. This is all by 2020, of course. We're working with the UNEP on some recommendations in that area. Also, we've done a lot of work on advocating ICTs for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So the idea there is that ICT and telecom devices should be more energy efficient. So we're looking for a 30% decrease in greenhouse gas emissions per device. And then the fourth goal is innovation and partnership. And so we in the latter goal, we're launching a partnership to encourage innovation in ICTs with 8 other organizations. I may have heard about it in the Emerge partnership, which we had a session on earlier in the week. The other thing is I wanted to mention was we're hoping to introduce a new category of membership for small and medium enterprises. We have a very low-cost membership category for universities, which has been very successful. We we are getting more universities joining almost every week. In fact, 4 universities joined ITU this week. So we now have 104. So we want to have a new category of membership, very low fee to encourage small and medium enterprises, which are the majority of businesses, and especially in the developing world. So this slide is to show the overall framework where we want to have international collaboration on implementing these 4 goals. ITU will be contributing, as I say, the work that we do in ITU, in the 3 sectors of ITU in this, but we really want to and will need to work with others, other partners to be able to implement these objectives, and that's why we're very happy that we have some potential collaborators around the table because we know a lot of organizations are setting similar sort of goals, and it's very important that we all work together. We all have limited resources, and we should pool our resources and work together to achieve these objectives. The ITU will be looking, as I say, at methods of measuring how successful we are in achieving these goals by measuring the progress on each target and reporting on it each year. So I think that's a brief introduction, and I know we have a lot of speakers and I don't want to take up any more time. This presentation will be available online, so you can have a better chance to read it when you have a look at it online. And I just really like to thank all the speakers that are joining us for this event, for working with us, hopefully to achieve these goals by 2020. So thanks very much, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. And indeed, then let's kickstart a further discussion. So first, we could ask Dr. Enrico Calandro, and so from he's Senior Research Fellow at Research ICT Africa. So from your perspective, from the research work you're doing, so what needs to be done, where we are now, and what needs to be done to achieve that agenda? How big is the challenge? Good.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity of giving my opinion on this agenda. And I would like to focus specifically on the challenges of measuring progress made in terms of targets, ICT access and use, maybe from the difficulties of the African continent. There is a need to have reliable data and in order to monitor progress of the information society. And what we have observed through our studies is that there's an unevenness of ICT indicators, both in the supply and in demand side data. With regards to the supply side, currently we all rely on ITU data. But in the African context, if we observe it also from a political economy perspective, countries have got difficulties in collecting timely and reliable data. So we have got many problems. Also, if we analyze simple measurements such as the number of broadband users or voice SIM cards, those data are problematic. Therefore, we need to engage more with government agencies, national regulatory agencies, to try to institutionalize more the data collection, because that's the big global data source that we all use for our studies that currently might be unreliable, especially in the African context. Secondly, with regards to demand side data, also in that case, we don't have enough ICT surveys conducted nationally. And in order to understand issues related to affordability or to inclusiveness of ICT, we need to collect this data because they provide factors and demographics that we need to understand in terms of gender, in terms of different levels of income, levels of education, and how these factors actually are affecting city access and use. Third, there might be opportunities in emerging data set. For instance, big data seems an opportunity to fill some of these data gaps. But currently, there is not a global consensus on how to use this data that might be available, both from mobile operators and from online platforms. So we actually should identify ways of having this data in the public good for policy-making purpose. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Enrico. So first of all, indeed, we need to know where we're going, so if we want to get there, and how fast we are. And I think we here from ITU is also really committed to measure that and improve the measurement. And thanks for your comments how to do that. Again, now, on the challenges of the connecting, one part is, I think, we need to start, before we discuss policy opportunities, we need to start with what are new technological solutions and business models to try to help us. And then we'll try to see in this discussion how we move to the policy. So in that regard, I would like to first ask Tom Lindstrom. So Tom is the Director of Government and Industry Relations of Ericsson. So from your perspective, what are the new opportunities that technologies and business models offer to connect next billions of people?
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation to this very important discussion. I'd like to start off with a few statistics from the Ericsson Mobility Report, which measures and forecasts coverage. Of course, the reason Ericsson has a mobility report is that we manage close to 1 billion subscribers, so we have a lot of data to base this on. And the current mobility report, there's a new one coming next week, forecasts that of the world population in 2020, about 90% will have mobile coverage. And that's coverage in such. Of course, it's mostly 2G coverage, but actually 40% is 4G coverage. And so that's an important thing. I mean, coverage will mostly be mobile. It will not be sort of fixed lines. No one imagine having fiber or copper to every person on the earth. So what can you do to increase this, both from a technology point of view and from a regulatory point of view? Well, if I start with the regulatory point of view, we think that a lot can be done if regulators put more requirements on coverage when they license spectrum. For instance, if 700 megahertz and 800 megahertz spectrum will be licensed in the near future in many countries, this is a good opportunity to cover more areas. So to take an example where technology is actually improving, we recently announced a project in Benin, in central and northern Benin, in areas where people live on only $2 a day. So very low cost economy. And here we deployed as a managed service where Ericsson actually provides the low power base stations and the whole infrastructure. We provide a managed service where the operator buys the capacity for the service they deliver. And so we are using low-cost base stations which have solar power, use satellite for the uplink. And the interesting thing here is that not only does it sort of provide connectivity, it also gives a lot of new people can be mobile money agents for the operator and sort of kickstart the local economy. Interesting in this project is that we started this a few months ago, and already we started in 50 villages. We had no connection at all, and already the operator is asking us to increase the coverage. So it's the local economy actually can and use these connectivity. So maybe I'll start that for this time.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Tom. So indeed, Tom already mentioned about that among the solutions is mobile and mobile broadband and what is needs to take in there. So that gives a good segue to, to ask the question to Dominic. So Dominic Lazansky, she's public policy director for GSMA. From the mobile industry perspective, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, how we will deliver new users, how we will connect new users to the global internet.
Thank you, Thomas. I believe that, in order to achieve the Connect 2020, as you just said, agenda, we actually have to do it primarily through mobile, because we all know, I look around the room with Facebook and Alliance for Affordable Internet, and we all know that's the way it's going, and that's what's happening now. So I'm just going to briefly talk about the 4 key barriers we've identified to internet access, and then solutions are indeed opportunities, and I'll try to be brief because I can see the time ticking away. Okay, we've identified in our mobile economy report for this year 4 barriers to internet access, and they're quite straightforward. Infrastructure being the one, which includes mobile internet coverage and also just infrastructure and adjacent infrastructure and putting infrastructure up. The second thing, though, also very important, is user capability, a lack of digital skills, as well as a lack of local content. The third one is low incomes and affordability, so affordability of access as well as affordability of handsets and various other mobile devices, as well as data plans and ownership. And finally, incentives, so relating to user capabilities as well, awareness of the internet, as well as social and cultural acceptances and the needs of the local community and consumers. So those are some of the barriers to internet access, which I think we're all seeing as challenges here. However, we also have solutions and actually some great opportunities. Obviously, the biggest opportunity is to get more people online. And that's quite exciting, actually, as the communities grow and as local content grows as well. Just a couple of quick sort of other solutions around infrastructure. Spectrum being the most important thing is what we need. And I know the WRC is happening right now, and there's lots of discussions around that. But I think, the availability of spectrum on a national basis is absolutely crucial, as well as obviously infrastructure sharing and the ability to have competition in markets, which drives access as well as drives down cost. Affordability, I mentioned briefly. Probably for the mobile industry, one of the most important issues is the taxation. I looked today, and it looks like our sector revenue, specifically actually in Brazil, but also in other countries across the world, like Jordan and Tunisia, 40% of our revenue goes to taxes. And obviously, driving down taxes and ensuring there's low taxation on our industry has a knock-on effect to consumers and would only benefit consumers as well. But also there's a diversity of devices coming out and various other options for consumers, and I think there's a lot of innovation around handsets and different types of ways to access that makes it available for all people to get online effectively. And it's exciting to see some of those new devices that become very much affordable. Finally, I'm just going to briefly talk about what I think is one of the biggest opportunities we have, and that's user capabilities and incentives from a user point of view and skills building. It's really exciting because at the GSMA we see a lot of new programs underway to ensure that local content is being created and used, and also local content that's in local languages. And just one example, which I've found a couple examples, but one example which was quite interesting is there's a South African social network called Mixit for a feature phone. So for like a low-end phone that has over 7 million users already. And so that's just one of many, many examples, but hugely exciting that people are starting to develop these things. Just finally, I just want to say education, training, capacity building, and involvement of governments, the private sector, and all stakeholders in ensuring that we can, help communities and individuals who want to get online and learn the skills is very important too. So I hope that was brief enough.
Great, thanks a lot, Dominic, both about the challenges and the solutions. Especially I think we need to plug it as well. Spectrum discussion is very timely. Just in Geneva right now, we have discussions of how to allocate spectrum for the next generation's broadband. So I hope that will enable further development as well. And in that, I'll, further would like to turn now to Andy O'Connell from Facebook. So also Facebook is no longer just about content, so it's also about how to bring people to be able to access that content. So from your perspective, what do you see how to do that, how to bring more people online, and what Facebook does about it?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for organizing this event. We at Facebook really feel strongly that this is an important conversation to be having, and that in fora like this should be an increasing area of focus. 2/3 of the people on the planet are still not connected to the internet, and a lot of us here sort of take it for granted, take the benefits for granted. Even in the preparation for this session, there was a little bit of a discussion that maybe we didn't need to talk about how important connectivity was because everybody here sort of understands that. But I do think it's important to emphasize that what we take for granted is denied to many, many, many billions of people. And that translates into very real world things like higher child mortality, a lack of jobs, a lack of education, a lack of information about healthcare. And I really do think that providing that connectivity to those people who are currently not connected needs to be an increasing part of the conversation around the world. And accordingly, our CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, at the UN General Assembly this year, gave a speech essentially calling on governments, civil society, and the private sector to redouble efforts on this front for the reasons that I just hinted at. So again, thank you so much for bringing more attention to this issue. From our perspective, I think we generally agree with the framing on the barriers. We sort of categorize the barriers as we approach it as awareness, affordability, and infrastructure. From our perspective, on the infrastructure, and we're trying to tackle all three. On the infrastructure side, we have what's called connectivity labs. And this is where we're working on longer-term research and development for sort of more breakthrough sorts of technologies. So this is when you've heard discussions about us using lasers and satellites and unmanned aerial systems. In our framework, that's about bringing connectivity to the 10% of people in the world who are not connected to the internet because of an infrastructure barrier. But there's also 50% of the people in the world are not connected to the internet for some combination of awareness and affordability. So if you actually look at the data, 90% of the people on the planet live in a place where the cellular infrastructure is strong enough that they could be online, but for some reason they're not. And our research suggests that the reason for that slice of people not being connected is, again, a combination of sort of awareness about the value of the internet and the affordability of the internet. And on the awareness piece, again, I want to emphasize that for all of us, we sort of take for granted the powerful, exciting, wonderful things you can do on the internet, but it's a really difficult thing to describe to somebody who hasn't been online, particularly when it's expensive for them to get online. And so one of the initiatives that we've been pursuing is called Free Basics, and it's designed to tackle both the awareness and the affordability barriers. And the way that it does that is we work with developers around the world, and we have an open platform so people can submit content to be included in a suite of zero-rated services that will be offered by mobile operators to people so that they can get a taste of the sort of wonderful things that are online, and that will serve as an on-ramp for them to get onto the broader internet. We've launched this program now in 29 countries with 31 cellular operators, and we're designing the program in such a way that people will understand the value of the internet and transition to the full internet paying as subscribers so that there's a sustainable business model for the operators who are going to be really an important part of tackling this global challenge. And all of these internet.org Free Basics launches include a wide variety of information. Just to be very clear, it's not just Facebook. It's Facebook and a number of other types of content sites, BBC, Wikipedia, and then a huge amount of local content as well. Again, all sourced through an open platform. So again, thank you for emphasizing this issue, which we think is really important. We're working on sort of the longer term R&D, and we're also working on sort of the shorter term business models And from our perspective, there's not going to be a silver bullet to these challenges. So we're trying lots of things, and we know lots of other people around the table are trying lots of things, and lots of people in the audience are trying lots of things. And we're hopeful that together we'll find a set of solutions to tackle what is probably one of the greatest challenges that we as a global community are going to have over the next 20, 30 years. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. And one of the challenges you mentioned is also affordability challenge, and that's I think we have some people who specifically work on that. So I'd like to introduce Raj Thakur, who is research manager at Alliance for Affordable Internet, an alliance that was specifically created to tackle that challenge. So from your perspective, how far we are from tackling this challenge and what needs to be done.
Yes, thank you, Thomas, and thanks for inviting us to participate in this discussion. So the Alliance is a global group of organizations focused primarily on the affordable issue, while we recognize that there are other barriers to access, as Andy and Dominic have already mentioned. In terms of how far we have left to go, every year we publish an affordability report which tracks the progress that countries are making towards, in terms of policies, towards bringing down industry costs and prices. And in our last report, we showed that 23 out of 51 developing countries have not yet met the 5% target, the cost over income target that the UN Broadband Commission set a couple of years ago. So there's significant work to be done. Our work focuses primarily on advocating for policy changes around key best practices. So this occurs at both international and national levels. At a national level, we work through several different multi-stakeholder country coalitions. I just wanted to highlight some of these policy best practices with some of the examples of how they're actually creating the kinds of changes that we think are important. So one is having effective broadband plans, and I think we're all aware of this. Our own research and others have shown that having a good broadband plans is correlated with lower industry costs and prices. Another important issue is taxation, which Dominic mentioned, but this is not just an operator issue, and this is important to recognize. Our work and what the basis on which we advocate shows that governments have to have a balanced fiscal policy with regard to how the taxation of ICTs, rather than just focusing on short-term revenues. There are many long-term benefits of having ICT diffusion within a country, which we just heard of, several which were mentioned. Another issue is to have strategies that focus on underserved populations. If we look at the inclusive targets within the agenda, the 2020 agenda, there are key targets here that focus on these kinds of groups. One way of doing this is to have broadband strategies that have targeted policy initiatives for specific groups. For example, in our work in the Dominican Republic, we have worked with a coalition there to make the national broadband plan, the revision of the national broadband plan, more gender responsive and more increases ability to address the gender access gap in that country. Another issue is with having strategies, government strategies that are flexible enough to accommodate new and innovative technologies that are inevitable and constantly emerging. And we often advocate for governments to experiment and try new strategies. And one thing that's emerging and we're seeing several pilot projects in many countries, is around TV white spaces. And this is important to increase our understanding of the use of these technologies to improve access and affordability. The last point I'd mention is with regard to measurement, which Enrico talked about. This is very important, especially in many developing countries. In Mozambique, we worked with the coalition there to help them set up an ICT module which could be included in the national census, which will be included in the national census. This module, by the way, was based on metrics and definitions as outlined by the ITU in terms of how what are important ICT indicators. We think that's an important step, and that is something we are working with in all the countries that we are engaged with in order to improve data measurement. So there are many different policy options. I mentioned a few that we focus on, but we are aware that there are many different strategies, all of which we think in combination can help reduce industry costs, help reduce prices, which ultimately is what the affordability question is about. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And already we're hearing quite a bit of enabling environments and what needs to be done and policy options. And OECD is also, as an organization, both as an organization and its members, has a lot of experience in terms of what are the enabling environments. Among your members are the people, the countries that are most connected, but also, you know, work in other less developed countries. So I would like to ask now Ms. Lorraine Porcinsula, the economist at the OECD, to share your views and your insights. What does it take, especially from an enabling environment perspective, to get more people online?
Thank you, Thomas. It's okay. Yeah, it's a bit echoing. I'll just be behind this. Hello? Okay. It's a bit better. No, I think it's echoing there. All right. I'm very pleased to be part of this panel. The Connect 2020 agenda is very dear to me, not only because it's very important, but because before joining the OECD, I actually worked on it, on the Broadband Commission. Before being in the OECD, I worked in the ITU under the Broadband Commission and with Thomas on drafting part of that plan. So thank you very much for inviting me. Now I speak as the OECD. I work in the Digital Economy Policy Division in the OECD, well, the OECD, as you know, we are a forum for sharing best practices, and we work in many issues. We work on issues related to from economics to governance to environment to health, and we cover all the policy areas that governments normally deal with. Except for security issues and military security. So at the OECD, there's an advantage because we can actually work with cross-area problems and with horizontal issues. And connecting the world is a horizontal issue because we are trying to move from the idea that ICTs and broadband as a distinct sector to the notion that the whole economy is being digitized and all the sectors are being touched for broadband. So being at OECD and being able to have a dialogue with other areas is very important, and for us it's very important that you have a holistic approach to connecting the world, not only looking at supply side issues, but also on demand side issues, on the application for that for governments in several different areas. And on that, apart from the work that we do with our country members and our key partners in the OECD, now we're doing a broadband policy toolkit for Latin America and the Caribbean, and starting one in Southeast Asia. So just to give you a brief introduction on that project, that's an OECD and IDB project. It started last year. We are now in the second phase of the project, and the idea is to update policies tailored for one specific region. In that case, that's Latin America and the Caribbean. The idea is to have a whole of government approach to the challenge of connecting to broadband populations. So the toolkit, in the first phase, we send questionnaires to understand what are the issues that countries are facing and governments are facing on connecting their populations. And right now we are in the second stage, which we are gathering the good practices from the region and putting them together with our good practices from our country members in the OECD, and trying to come up with tailored recommendations for what they can do to improve their policy frameworks and to update their policy frameworks for the coming challenges of the future. So we touch on issues on regulatory frameworks and the idea that you need the correct incentives so private sector can work and invest in infrastructure. We work on spectrum policy, competition, extending broadband access through universal funds, affordability taxation, ICTs for development, and disability issues are included there too. Convergence issues, regional integration, education skills for the digital economy, business ICT uptake, ICT entrepreneurship, industry and local content, e-health, digital government, and trust in the digital economy. So that includes consumer protection and digital security and privacy. And we understand that all of these issues go hand in hand. And you cannot talk about connectivity without taking into account the risks that being connected brings, such as privacy and security issues. You cannot not consider, for example, the convergence challenge, the challenges that convergence brings when you're doing your national broadband plan, because, well, those technologies are changing and your framework needs to be adapted for that. So we understand that in order to tackle the challenge of connecting the world, you do need to look at this issue as the holistic issue that it is. And the Connect 2020 agenda is a good example of doing just that and trying to come up with indicators that actually measure the end goal, which is connecting people.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. And indeed, a very long list of the things that we need to do, to connect with people. But that's why we have a lot of stakeholders around the table. And also, I think, and you also mentioned some good practices. And I'm also proud that we have some people presenting good practices around the table. So Piret Urb is working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Estonia, and Estonia is both as a rather lead example in the world how to do the connectivity for its own country, but I believe you have both examples and initiatives to share, also how to help others to go to travel the same road as well. So Piret, so what's your experience from Estonia? How to connect the remaining people?
Thank you very much, Thomas. I'm very happy to be here today. And as you might guess, in Estonia, we can easily say that the biggest religion is ICTs and the free internet, which has to be open and accessible to everybody all the time. And we know that ICTs has become the main tool for an increasing competitiveness in every field of the economy and life. And any strategy or development plan should take into account opportunities offered and challenges posed by the ICTs. Actually, to contribute to the ITU's agenda, Connect 2020, Estonia has created our own agenda, which is Digital Agenda 2020. So this is exactly the concrete activities what we are planning to do and what we have started already. And there are many activities how to cooperate with others more and better, because this is the only way how we reach to this 2020 agenda and how we can implement it as well as possible. So our agenda is not focusing on the use of ICTs in various areas of life and policy, but the main goal is to strengthen the environment that facilitates the use of ICTs and the development of smart solutions in every field in the country in general. And the ultimate goal is to increase the economic competitiveness, the well-being of the people and the efficiency of the public administration, because this is something what everybody is always complaining in every country, I guess. Some people touched here the topic of next generation broadband network, and we have started with that actually, and we have the target that by 2020 the development of the network will be fully completed. And that means that all residents of Estonia will have access to fast internet, which is 30 megabytes or faster, and at least 60% of the households will be using ultra-fast internet daily, which is 100 megabytes. As internet is connecting people, and also, as I said earlier, to implement the IT-use agenda, we think that it would be very practical for countries to join forces and not develop necessary basic service infrastructure on their own, especially for the small countries like Estonia or for the group of countries in the certain regions. So we are more and more interested in cooperation with our neighbors for the development of X-Road, for e-identity, for example, and for digital signature. And of course, there are many other components which are part of this basic service infrastructure. Please, you can show me the sign if I'm becoming too long or something. Okay, is it still okay? I haven't been following, sorry. Yeah. As certainly some people in the room know that Estonia is going to hold the EU presidency on 2018. So there we have the goal to expand the use of digital signature in the EU, like increasingly by 2020. And this is important because it is facilitating the everyday work for the business operations, and also for the people it is facilitating management of personal matters. And to take up the digital signature of the EU will be like very important for everybody in the region to grow on faster. But someone also mentioned, I think our colleague from OECD mentioned the privacy issue here. And we have been also thinking on that in the context of growing data volumes and the widespread cross-usage of data. The greater control over the use of personal data has to be created. And we would like to see more and more in Estonia that everybody knows and will be able to decide who and when and for what purpose is using or watching their personal data from the public sector. For the greater connectivity, Estonia is cooperating with many countries in the world through our development aid, of course, but also through our e-governance academy, who is taking all the e-services to the many countries in the world. They have about like more than 40 countries at the moment, but these are the countries who have been interested in themselves in the services. So, and they are cooperating with the state. Of course, state is financing the e-governance academy, but they are like a separate and independent body with many experts going around in the world and like helping to make the first steps for the countries. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Piret, of sharing experiences in both of the country and and how to build the synergies, and also reminding us that there are risks as well, as Lorraine did as well here. And also, just before we turn to the audience, would also like to again to ask Malcolm. So you presented the framework of the collaboration, but what ITU will specifically do also to progress the connectivity?
Thank you, Thomas. Well, as you said, the intention is that it sets a framework, and very interested to hear what's being done in Estonia. And that there's a linkage there, as well as what Facebook is doing and others around the table. We all have the same goals, which everybody recognizes are very important goals. U.S. State Department has also set the same target as ITU for another 1.5 billion online by 2020. So it shows, a lot of people are making the same efforts, and we need to collaborate together, and that's the key to it. And very much hope that we can have collaboration from those speakers here, and we can work together with you and others to achieve these goals. Just very quickly, what ITU is doing. Well, I think the the importance of mobile spectrum has come out quite clearly, and I believe we have around 3 times as many people using mobile broadband as using fixed broadband now. And if you're going to extend out to the other 4 billion people that are not online, a lot of these are living in rural areas of developing countries. Like 70 or 80% of the population in developing countries are in rural areas. And how are you going to get to them? Clearly, it's going to be through radio. And making a spectrum available in the UHF band, the 700, 800 megahertz band, offers the opportunity for much wider coverage at lower costs. So that plus the move towards TV white spaces as broadcasters move from analog to digital also offers good opportunities there. So that's something, of course, ITU is the only organization that can regulate the use of the spectrum, so that's a very important role for ITU. Then the other issues like the skills and encouraging people to adopt broadband plans, capacity building, that's very much in the development sector of ITU, which is doing a lot of work in that area. And also on the standard side, of course, a lot of the new standards now we adopt are far more energy efficient than previously. We even have a standard for a universal mobile phone charger, so hopefully people will be buying a mobile phone separate from the charger. So the charger should, because many of the main vendors agree with the actual connection between the charger and the phone. So things like that, and plus the new G.fast standard offering 1 gigabits over traditional copper telephone lines is good. But I think a very important point was made at the beginning by Enrico is that we've got these targets, and we need to measure them, and we need to be sure we're making progress. So how are we going to measure them? And the data that we gather is going to be very important. And I know ITU comes out with these statistics, but very often they get criticized, so working together in that area I think is very important, and hopefully we can improve the means by which we measure our progress. That we would like to work very much with you in those areas. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. And we had quite a bit from the panel, but I now would like to, looking at the audience, who would like to both questions and comments on what you're doing in that regard. Please, and please introduce yourself before speaking, and thanks also for the transcript as well.
My name is Chennai Che, and I'm with Research ICT Africa, colleague with Enrico Calandro. My contribution to this is that I think in the deployment, in order to achieve the goals that we've set, there's a need to also understand and prioritize demand-side issues. And in regards to this context in which these plans are being deployed, as well as the content that's available, I'm from South Africa, so I'm just looking at one of the business solutions that has been provided by Facebook through internet.org. It seems like it's a great opportunity for people in urban areas because a lot of the platforms on the free basics are what most people my age in urban areas do. But when it comes to someone from a rural area, some of the content on there is irrelevant. So then you have a problem of people still not choosing rather not to go online because the content, firstly, it's in English. Secondly, it's irrelevant to what it is exactly that they want to do. So I think in implementation, even if not just content, but as well as infrastructure rollout, there's a need to understand what is it exactly is on the ground. So I'm sure it's been covered, but I think it needs to be prioritized as well. And then also in terms of content, I think of context, there's a need to understand that I think someone from GSMA mentioned Mixit and having 7 million users. Unfortunately, it's actually fallen because WhatsApp has taken over, and so once again another global conglomerate comes in and the local company can't sustain. So I think context is key in implementation of achieving the 2020 goals. Thank you.
Excellent. Brief
Yeah, I think the important thing, you're absolutely right, and the important thing is that our members, our operators that are in those countries need to be involved, right? So it needs to be people like MTN and those guys, because they are the ones that know what's on the ground. So I think that's crucial to what you're saying, because a lot of the local content stuff wouldn't happen without knowing what's there, and I can't do that, but our operators can work with other people there, so.
Please. Yeah.
Hi. Okay. My name is Saeed and I come from Afghanistan. I don't represent the government in this event, but I will talk on behalf of the government because some of the concerns that were raised were on the supply side. So the two, we have all the challenges that were mentioned. Almost all of them exist in Afghanistan, but two of them that I could see is the legal infrastructure. Sometimes that becomes, it hinders in the foreign investment and also in terms of the data protection of the users. We don't have like an e-commerce law or e-transactional law or let's say cybersecurity law. And I'll give you the example of PayPal. When we reached out to them, they said, since you don't have an e-commerce law in the country, we cannot really invest or reach out to you. The second was the unified national policy. Because of the aid organization, aid agencies coming up and work in different silos, there is no momentum of development in terms of the ICT sector. So these are the two issues that I didn't see in the overall goals of the ITU, and or maybe I'm missing it. If you could probably hint towards that. Thank you.
If you could read about rural, the last point, so it was just
so my question was the legal infrastructure, is that covered in your overall agenda?
Okay, we'll answer. Thanks a lot, and then, please.
From Portugal, good morning to all of you. Thank you for organizing this panel and for all panelists, in particular to Deputy Secretary General Malcolm Jameson for presenting Agenda Connect 2020. I'm trying to make a linkage between this panel and what we have been hearing this week, and in particular the discussions on the UN General Assembly high-level meeting that will take place in December. I would like to raise a question. What do you see the implications of that meeting could have on this agenda that we have been talking about this morning? Thank you very much.
Thanks. I think we'll answer all the questions together if it's okay, because time. So please, Alison first.
Thank you very much, Alison Gilward from Research ICT Africa. I wanted to welcome the inclusion of universities as members, because I think over the last few years we've really suffered from an input of public interest, sort of independent public interest research into forums like IGF and ICANN and various other multilateral fora. I think this gap has been filled by commercial research or research that is supported by a commercial agenda, increasingly with a lot of big state donor support as well. And a lot of the research is actually informing policy in ways that is actually erroneous. So I think we're dealing with evidence problems with the data that we're dealing with. And hopefully the inclusion of this membership can actually enhance or bring back some sort of independent academic rigor to the research. I mean, a lot of the things that have happened since the Broadband Commission, the kind of quite arbitrary decision around 5% as affordability, the correlations between broadband plans and prices and stuff, simple correlations without a number of considerations or controls for other factors. The three of probably the best broadband plans in Africa introduced over the last 3 years, arguably, in Kenya, South Africa, and Nigeria. No progress has been made on implementation. So the real sort of political economy challenges around institutions, building institutional capacity, and of course the demand side issues around human development, I think are absolutely critical, and they're not in this measurement scheme, they're not in our research agendas, and as a result we're not going to address the serious issues, the serious problems. I mean, even if you take the really problematic, gender research that's coming out recently and informing these decisions, again, not based on nationally representative samples, not being undertaken in conjunction with national statistics officers or any university or anybody that's setting some standards, producing results that are on the basis of simple descriptive statistics do show enormous disparities. But when in fact you control, for example, in relation to gender for income and education, you actually don't find any disparities around, with sex, or gender, if you want to call it that, although it's actually sex descriptors. So, addressing those issues in terms of discounts for women or something like that is actually the wrong policy intervention. The policy intervention there is to address the serious issues of, women and children, girl children being kept out of education and therefore out of jobs, etc. These are far more difficult problems to tackle, but I think it really goes to the issue of us needing to look at ICTs horizontally and no longer just as a simple sector, because our solutions then are only addressing the problem. And I don't get a sufficient sense of the ICT ecosystem in the 2020 agenda, and I think we'll have to be looking at a whole new set of indicators in order to measure those outcomes, including looking more closely at labour force surveys, at human development indices and those kinds of things. And there are problems with those as well as they currently exist. So I think it's an enormous challenge to assess progress here.
Thanks very much, Alison. Please, here and then.
Good morning. My name is Maktar Sek from UNECA. I think we have several initiatives around the world. I'm just focused the necessity to collaborate within all agents working on this area. Now, I was not at the beginning of the session, but I saw you have Smart Africa there, initiative in Africa, initiated by ITU. We have also in Africa the AU 2063 agenda, and also at the UNECA, UN Economic Commission for Africa, we did a lot to support African countries in terms of connectivity, access, information, also to develop right policy. We work on the broadband, how to assess broadband in Africa, to help the decision making to understand the contribution of ICT to the economic growth. Also, how to use innovation among youth, because in Africa you have more than 60% of the population are youth, and we need for youth to enhance and to know very well the use of innovation technology for the development. I think we have several initiatives, and we work also on within the partner area of ICT for UN agency. We work closely with ITU and UNCTAD on several areas. I think we needed to bring on board in your initiative all organizations working on the same objective. I just want to focus on this collaboration. It's very important. You are going to say me we have the UN Group Information Society, but this one is not enough. We need to involve all. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And actually, a very important point, I think part of this panel is to kind of how to bring those stakeholders. So the ultimate challenge to every speaker here. So I'll try to do the same order as we did, just the last final comments, and you'll see what you can capture from discussion. And challenges like 20 seconds here. So capturing what we have here, and especially that point of Magda's, how we could collaborate, or what more can be done. So Enrico, maybe let's start with you.
Okay, the challenge, I think, is clear, and it's the need to identify ways to collect systematically ICT indicators, both in the supply and in demand side.
Well, Tom.
Well, I think it's quite clear that a mobile connection will be the solution for everyone. The question is, how can society actually get people to see the benefits from this? This is the essential for the local economy and also indeed for the global economy, to get the benefits, that people see the benefits of connectivity. That's the most important thing. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Dominic?
I think it's really clear that we all need to work together and to collaborate across the world, locally and internationally, to make this happen.
Sorry, no, yes, Andy.
The scale of this challenge is staggering, and there's not going to be any one solution, one policy, one program that's going to tackle it. We're going to need all of these initiatives, all of these ideas, lots of experimentation, and we're going to need to be humble and flexible about trying many, many different ways to tackle this challenge.
Thanks. Just to say that in the processes we use to develop these policy solutions, we have to make sure we include as many voices as possible, particularly from the groups that are typically excluded from those processes.
Just to say that we need to share good practices, not only on designing plans, and we mentioned, some of you mentioned legal infrastructure or regulatory frameworks and also capacity building, but also on implementing those plans. And we need to share what countries are doing, which is working, and share with the countries which are not doing at this moment.
I think that we especially appreciate the ITU's increasing cooperation with academia, which is very important and which has to continue. And all that what we spoke here can be achieved only in a very close cooperation with the private sector, the businesses who are able to provide this tech knowledge and to work out the practical solutions, and also with close cooperation with civil society, who are the main help of the state to be able to implement it in every corner of the country. Thank you.
Before giving to Malcolm, I would like to ask Michaela from State Department also to share just to make the point what you are doing in that and how we could all do it together.
Sure, thank you very much, Thomas. Michaela Klein from the U.S. Department of State. Deputy Secretary General Johnson talked a little bit about a new initiative that the State Department announced back in September called Global Connect. It's an initiative to bring an additional 1.5 billion people online by 2020, which, like we've talked about today, is very familiar, and it's great that we are all aligning to a very similar goal. The purpose is to catalyze multi-stakeholder effort around these very important challenges, and particularly encouraging development banks and various organizations and all stakeholders to really consider connectivity as essential to human development and economic development, just like roads and electricity and other sorts of things. Based on this panel, we're very encouraged by the number of initiatives that are underway, and we would view our initiative as mutually reinforcing and complementary to many of what we hear. And so we're very interested in speaking with all of you in the last few hours of IGF, as well as in the coming months, to really see how we can all work together on these really important goals, and looking forward to those further discussions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Michaela. Very encouraging. So maybe I'll ask Malcolm for his final takeaways.
Yes, thanks, Thomas. Just to very quickly respond to a couple of the questions on the legislative framework. We do have quite a lot of best practice available on the ITU website, and OECD has as well, I'm sure. And we have an annual gathering of regulators, global symposium for regulators, where these practices are encouraged. And on Manuel's point, of course, I think we all here recognize ICTs as essential for the implementation of the SDGs. We have this WSIS forum every year in Geneva normally in May, and it's very important now that we link the action lines from the WSIS to the SDGs, so that we can see exactly a linkage between the two, and the Connect 2020 will be the target that the ITU membership will be aiming for within implementing the SDGs. So I think it connects quite nicely. I take the points made about the indicators. It's a critical issue, and as I said, we have a lot of academia members, 104 I think it is currently. So any more academia members that could join us and help us with the indicators would be very welcome. And on the advocacy, of course, it's one of the main roles of ITU is to advocate the use of ICTs. We've been doing that especially in the climate change conferences for many years, and we've been doing it more recently in terms of implementing the SDGs. We organize events and we look to get speakers from outside of ITU. So hopefully we'll be inviting and you'll be coming along to some of these events when we'll be advocating and getting the message across that connectivity and ICTs are essential if we're going to implement the SDGs. I think everybody's talked about the importance of collaboration, so hopefully we all agree it's important. We'll all be collaborating together from now on, and look forward very much to that. So thanks very much, Thomas.
Thanks very much. So with that, concluding this panel, and if you could join me in the round of applause to all the panelists and yourselves. And well-deserved late lunch for everyone to you, so thanks very much.